discussing the first phase of the LIBRE Project, the development of the conceptual framework and the items. Medical advances and high survival rates of burn survivors now demand a consideration of long-term outcomes for health, quality of life, and the social impact of burns. Burn survivors face unique and significant challenges in their work, personal relationships, and in social interactions. Currently, there is no conceptual framework of community reintegration and social participation specific to burn survivors, and no instrument to specifically and comprehensively measure the social impact of burns over the recovery trajectory and beyond. The aim of this presentation is to describe the development and validation of a conceptual framework for understanding the social impact of burn injuries in adults, and the development of a large item pool for the purposes of calibration using item response theory for the future development of a computer adaptive test. There were three main methodological phases to this project. First, to develop a draft of the conceptual framework, we conducted a comprehensive literature review and consulted with clinical experts and burn survivors about the social impact of burns. Second, we held focus group with burn survivors and clinicians to generate conceptual areas that the measure ought to cover and validate this draft framework. Participants were asked what important everyday activities were affected by burns, what areas of their life were affected in getting back to living, and also about any identifiable milestones or moments that signified a change in the areas discussed. Third, we conducted interviews with burn survivors to assess the clarity and consistent interpretation of candidate items. We used a concurrent approach with targeted verbal probes. Every item was administered to at least 3 different burn survivors. To organize and classify potential items into different conceptual groups, we had 2 independent reviewers bin the items identified from legacy measures. The agreed-upon list was brought to the research team for consensus about inclusion. That group consisted of researchers, clinicians, and 1 burn survivor. We then modified, removed, and wrote new items based upon an iterative review process. Focus groups' transcripts were transcribed, and grounded theory and constant comparative analysis were conducted to develop the coding scheme for the interviews. We used 2 coders for each transcript, and areas of disagreement were brought to the research group to reconcile. Based upon our literature review, we identified 560 items from 19 legacy measures, which were reduced down to 276 items based upon their relevancy or redundancy between items. We chose participation, as defined by the World Health Organization's International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health, as our primary guiding model, and specifically focusing on the idea of social participation, which involves the engagement in a life situation that typically involves other people. We conceptually focused further on interpersonal interactions and relationships, major life areas, and community, social, and civic life. We were able to get participants in the focus groups who were wide across the continuum of all demographics such as age, time since burn, and total burn surface area. A wide range is quite important more important than the representativeness in this type of work, as you wish for maximum variation of experiences to be represented. There were 2 main domains that came out from the focus group analysis, the first of which is the social role of participants, which involved subdomains work and employment, recreation and leisure, and relating with strangers. At the crux of these conceptual groups are the roles that people play in their daily lives that they must return to following a burn injury, very often in the public sphere. The second large domain that came out of the analysis is that of personal relationships, family, romantic, sexual, and informal, which are primarily friendships. Unique to this domain is the general endurance of these types of relationships. We then wrote additional items based upon the focus group analysis to augment the item pool of legacy measures and better adapt the conceptual framework to issues specifically related to burn survivors. For example, a burn survivor said, "In one way, you may have to change your method and you may have to change your mode, but you can overcome those physical obstacles in some ways or another." we wrote the recreation and leisure item, I do things I enjoy, even if I have to do them differently, based upon this content. In regards to romantic relationships, one survivor shared his experience, quote, "I had a relationship that predated the fire, and it just gelled and came together in a way after that, because we had been through this together. You know, I think it moved us 10 years forward in terms of trust and connection and solidity," which led to our writing the item, "My relationship with my partner got stronger since my burn." In addition to the major conceptual domains identified, there were also some themes in the analysis that we felt provided good content for items in several different domains. For example, in the focus groups, clothing was discussed a lot. As noted here, some burn survivors stated, "My burn is so recent that I've loved this long, hard winter because I'm all covered up, and I'm dreading the warm weather when I go to short sleeves and short skirts. I don't know how I'm going to feel, never mind thinking about how other people around me will feel." Another survivor noted, "First I went to the pedal pushers, and you know, the 3/4 length, and then last year I said, oh hell with it, I'll put back on my short shorts." And finally, when you learn to wear whatever clothes you want and you just tell everybody, don't look, you don't have to look at it. Based upon this theme, we wrote 3 different items across different content domains. My family is comfortable with my burns being seen in public. I feel that my partner accepts how I look, and I dress to avoid stares. After writing, revising, and removing items based upon the focus group findings, we had 253 items that were then cognitively tested. Again, the purpose of cognitive interviews is to make sure that potential respondents interpret the items consistently and as intended. Similar to our focus group demographics, we were able to have a nice range of age, burn injury experiences, and education level with our cognitive interview sample. Based upon feedback from cognitive interviews, the group then met and made revisions to many items. For example, we originally had this quotation from the focus groups. "I found out that when I went out in public and I was in a good mood, and I learned very early on to look people in the eye, and I learned that if I had a smile on my face, they did not stare. It is mainly my attitude that depends on how people receive the scars on me." And we wrote the item, "How I feel affects how people react to me." In cognitive debriefing, we got the following interpretations of this item. "Right now, though, how I look affects more how people react to me than how I feel. I could be happy and people might still avoid me." And, "If I'm not in a good mood, people aren't going to be around me. If I'm friendly, people would want to be around. I don't know how it relates to burn injury." So based upon these inconsistencies, we wrote the item to be, "I can help strangers feel comfortable around me." Another example, we wrote the item, "My family allows me to feel bad," after a burn survivor had said, quote, "I wish my parents would have given me the opportunity to really sit down and just cry and be like, oh my gosh, I'm burnt. It was like I never got to stop and have that human feeling of, will I ever?" In cognitive interviews, one person noted that you could interpret this item in a few ways. Either my family is neglecting my feelings and letting me feel bad, or 2, my family doesn't overreact and allows me to feel my feelings. Everybody has bad days. I'm not sure what you're getting at. Therefore, we wrote the item that we think clarifies it. My family helps me through my bad days. Our final item pool that we are now currently administering to 600 burn survivors for calibration is 192, and here you can see the final items in each hypothesized domain. You'll see that our other category includes items that we felt were conceptually related to social impact and social participation, but didn't necessarily fall in any of the specific hypothesized domains. Those items are, my burns give me a greater sense of purpose, I like helping other burn survivors, and my burns help me to understand other people's problems. In conclusion, the qualitative results strongly suggest that the conceptual model fits the constructs for societal role and personal relationships with 7 subdomains. The resulting measure will be the first to specifically measure the social aspects of burn survivors' life throughout the entire recovery process. Thank you.